Good afternoon all. Yes, it's me again. In answer to that question, yes, you can set up a... And I sense from talking to people there's a huge will and a huge desire to set up something which deals with the skills of live events and other sectors. I think the lady that spoke there about sectors going forward. I mean, I've worked with a number of people, especially with events and tourism and hospitality, and these are all money drivers for the GDP of a country. But it also means that the young people and the older people are getting upskilled to be able to do some worthwhile things and make a destination for people to come. So, yeah, I think that question is, you should do it, and hopefully you will do it. What it looks like could be something like this. I have a, as they say in Blue Peter, I have one here that I did this morning. So, remembering not to touch that button. So, setting up a technical and vocational college in Africa. I don't really know that that's the name it's going to finish up with, but it's a good starting place. Because, as we said this morning in the questions from over there, there's got to be a lot of discussion among you as the people who are here and what it will look like, what it will be and what it will do. And we can advise and help with that, but ultimately you know the situation and it's your place. So that's quite important. So just whipping on, because I know that you're all wanting your tea now, just revisit one slide that I did this morning. What's 20th century skills the students need? And it was those. And I think that those are the sorts of skills that we really need to foster. And you can make those skills fit or make things work in most of the disciplines that you bring to it, whether it be events, whether it be tourism, whether it be hospitality, whether anything. And you can make them fit because it's all the same. That would lead you to perhaps 6 design principles. So when you decide what it's going to be and how it will be, whether it's a physical entity or it's a virtual entity or it's a shed down the bottom, it doesn't really matter. I would urge that you think about the design principles. Why are you doing it and what do you want from it? Going back to my students again, they got a star this time. I think some of the things that you're looking at is that you want 21st century skill outcomes. So you look at the skills appropriate for the time, and your outcomes after you work there should be 21st century skills that people want and are relevant. The curriculum should be relevant. And I think that was part of the discussion this morning. What's a relevant curriculum? And I go back to, my child in the schools. I learned the dates of battles, and I know all the at that time the capital cities of all the countries who have all now changed, and a lot of them don't exist anymore. And I'm sure that stood me in good stead, and that's why I can stand up here talking about this, because I know when the Battle of Hastings was. However, I think it is important that the curriculum should apply to what the students are going to ultimately finish up doing. And that, I think, is very good. And the applied curriculum is, once you've decided what that curriculum will be, how do you apply it? So the teaching should be 21st century, and I don't mean that everything should revolve around technology, but the teachers should think, or the mentors should think, or the professionals should think, what am I trying to impart to our students that they can use, and how can I best do it? Because there are many styles of learning. This is one style of learning. It's called sage on the stage or guide on the side. See, I'm Americanisms. I've been talking to Randall too much. But that's what they call it. You sage up here. This is what I'm telling you, and it must be true because I wouldn't be standing here. But there are many ways of doing it. There are many styles you can use. And I think the styles that you use there are very important because different students, they they respond to different styles. Not all of them respond to, this is how you're going to do it. Not all of them respond to, think of your own way. And because a lot of people can't think of their own way, and they sit there scratching their heads for 2 hours thinking, what is my way? So it's got to be a blend. So I think that that's important, 21st century teaching. It ought to be looked at in terms of how do you assess it. Now that's going to be the thorny issue. And informative assessments are really, really interesting. When I was at Apple, and I must apologise, I keep going back, but I did quite a lot of work on this here, and I did it with these people of this age. We created something called the Digital Creator, would you believe? And it was a course with several modules, and it was how to create things digitally, how to make film, how to make animation, how to do audio, how to make music, and we battled with the qualifications councils who said to get this accredited you must do it in this way, and we were saying you can't do it in this way. How can you give a number for someone who's created a video, or how can you give them an assessment, very good, or come back later, things like that. So we invented this thing called Digital Creator, and it was taken up by a lot of people. And we had a lot of video makers, film makers, and music makers who'd come and give master classes and workshops, and then they'd devise projects. So those sorts of things are very important, and these are the discussions that you will have, hopefully. You need a culture in there, a culture of creativity and innovation. Because if you don't have that culture, then it just becomes another school, teaching facts, and you don't want that. Well, you might do, but I don't think you do. And so therefore that culture has to be engendered by the people who work there. And there has to be a way, so if you called it the Johannesburg stroke Cape Town stroke Northwest Academy, you have to have a way of doing things. And that way of doing things, when you bring new people in, they immerse themselves in your way of doing things. And so everybody knows that's how it's done. And it gets a reputation. And finally, I think the important thing is 24/7 access to resources. Because learning never stops. We always, those of you who remember, when we were being schooled or at college, it was from a certain time to a certain time. End of. But I would venture to suggest that if you are investing funding into an institution which is skills-based, it ought to be open all the time. When I first went to Jamaica, and I was doing some stuff on community education out there, and I went to a school up in the mountains in Jamaica, and we were taken up there in some really swish Chevrolet Suburbans with blacked out windows and armed guards. So we went up there, and then we went to this school, and I didn't realise it was the 4th shift of that school. So a whole lot of students had come in from one district, and they did some work and did their stuff, and then another shift came in. I was talking to a girl who walked 4 hours down the mountain to go there, and they were creating their own jerk sauces. Sounds very simple, but they'd put a lot into it. They'd researched what goes into it. They'd tested it on their brothers and sisters, many of whom are still here. They tested it on relatives, and they gave it to neighbours. And based on that, they did a little bit of writing about it and produced a jerk sauce. And they offered it to me when I got in there. And it was very nice. And they gave me 2 bottles to take back to England. So I flew back with 2 bottles of jerk sauce. And I'll always remember that place. It was full of people who were desperate to learn, full of people with hope, who walked for ages to get there. But they were making best use of that resource. And they were packing students in, not at the same time, but at different times. And that's why I say 24/7 is very important, because it's not going to be cheap. So, that's worth looking at. At the end, by the way, please disagree because it's only my thoughts. In the UK, and I mentioned this morning, they've started these things called university technical colleges. I'd like to strike university off because I don't get on with universities, but there you go. And what they do is it's a type of free school. And they're introduced as part of the UK Academies programme, because we've got a big programme. They're funded by the taxpayer. They're non-selective, that's very important. They're non-selective, and they're free to attend. So there's no real barrier to anybody going. And they're not controlled by local authorities, so they're not subject to local politics, and that is very important. And they're specifically designed to enrol students aged 14 to 19. So it's something I mentioned this morning about taking students in at 14, because that is often a tricky time of their life, and you can give them some interesting information and some good advice and guidance a part of that. UTCs all have a university as a lead sponsor. However, the most distinctive element of UTC is they have to offer technically oriented courses of study, combining the national curriculum, which would be the same as your matriculation, I think, requirements with technical and vocational elements. So what they're saying is they're still going to continue learning because they're only 14, so they're still going to be doing some maths and some grammar in the language of their choice. And there was an interesting discussion about what language is there. I still haven't got to the bottom of this, but somebody can teach me. And so they do that. But all the time, they are looking at turning out skilled young people with the qualifications to fit the industry they're going into. So I think that's very important. UTCs must specialise in subjects that require technical and modern equipment. And this is, to me, the most important thing. It's only me that thinks this. They also have to teach business skills. If I tell you that in the UK we've just come out of a recession, I think Adrian mentioned it this morning, and part of the thing that got us out of the recession is there were more than 10,000 small businesses started up during the recession. One man, two men, one woman, two women, a group, a team, started a business. And some of them thrived, some of them failed because of lack of business acumen. But a lot of them were successful. And they were often groups of friends or colleagues, and they started up a business with some skills they got. And I think that they've recognised now that that's the way forward, because the state can't provide all of the employment for everybody in the country. And so therefore, it's all about, and I spoke to someone this morning, and forgive me, I can't remember his name, but we were talking about this, and he said quite clearly, listen, we don't want handouts, we just want help doing what we'd like to do. And that's so key, isn't it? It's not about giving people money, it's about giving them the skills to do some work that they're interested in. And that's what we're trying to do. And therefore, they offer clear routes into work. This is one of them, Vision and Values of Silverstone UTC. For those of you who don't know, Silverstone is our Grand Prix racing track for Formula One. But around Silverstone are many, many, many small enterprises. Most of the teams, McLaren and you name them, and all these things, not Ferrari, and certainly not Mercedes, because they've got a methodical way of doing things. Haven't they, Randall? But there's very small groups who specialise in fast motors and development and design. So they have this set of vision and values. To boost the economy. So important, isn't it? To boost the economy by ensuring an increased and improved supply of technicians and highly skilled vocationally qualified people. That's exactly, I think, what you want to do. So that's the first one. The mission is to produce high-performing, work-ready young people in a college without walls. And this college doesn't have walls because it has lots of places around it where the students go. They come back sometimes and they do some theory. So that's important. Work ready. That's so, so important. I know that my son, who, I'm not sure he's work ready now, and he's 25, but he was never work ready, and the reason he wasn't work ready, because no one was getting him up at a certain time, and he wasn't ready for work. He didn't know. And you know, I shouldn't be gender specific, but having had twins, a girl and a boy, the strife difference, I couldn't believe it. My daughter was up and doing things, and my son was like, well, you know, it's plenty of time. So that's cool. And a college without walls. A college can be whatever you want it to be. And it can be as big or as small, and it can be enclosed or not enclosed, but that's important. Their core values to promote excellence, you can't argue with that, foster creativity and be a catalyst for transformational technical learning to inspire young people to take a technical career path. I'll tell you what, in your discussions you ought to take these and just rejig them a bit, because these are great, I think. And our culture, this is the culture of their UTC, to be professional, dignified, authoritative, yet irresistible, energetic and inspirational. So I use that as an example, and I think it's a pretty good example, and it's something that you could do here. So what's the process? And I won't dwell too long on this because it's a process that I've done but might not fit you, but I'll go through it because you don't look that bored yet. So the steps. And you have to be professional about this. I'm not saying you know, because you're all professionals. But you have to produce a costed business plan. And if you don't, you never know how much you're going to spend. And you're talking about, well, how much do you want? Well, you know, so it's worth doing that. And not only that, it focuses all your minds, because I guess you'll be a series of committees who will work at this, and you've got something to hang on to. Identify partners for funding. That could mean a number of things. Find those with companies with big pockets that you can pick. That's one way of looking at it. But if you use the skills that companies need to get qualified people into their workforce, they will go for it. And it's been proven. So that's the first thing. Produce a curriculum plan to meet your learning and employability needs and targets. Plan for your future needs. Difficult because you don't know what your future needs are going, but you do a sort of risk assessment saying, what if that happens, or what if that happens? So you're ready for it. You're agile and you're fleet of foot. Everything I'm not. And then you identify the constraints to achieving the goals, and then you find solutions. Because there's always going to be threats, and there's always going to be difficulties. And if you can sort of identify what some of those might be, then they're not going to catch you on the hop. And you can actually say, well, yeah, we thought about that, and we're going to do this. Some of the constraints. Your curriculum, your teaching, your assessment, and your monitoring procedures might be weak. So in other words, you don't know how to assess your students. You don't really know about the teaching of it. And your monitoring procedures, how they're doing, are weak. And that happens quite a lot. So you have to have a pretty robust system in there, and you have to have a marshal who, mostly with heavy boots, who goes round and looks at whether those procedures are right. Too many faculties and too many courses. I've seen so many places fail because they decide to do everything. I can never remember the phrase. I think it's dig deep, but dig narrow. In other words, concentrate on a few things, but dig down into it. Whereas many people, they want to plough everything up and say, oh, look how many crops we've got. Half of them they can't even recognise. So that's important. And then I go on about technology and infrastructure, because the thing about UTCs is they've got to be tech savvy, and they want them to be tech savvy. And that's what's going forward. Erratic and expensive power. I shan't mention it again, because I know it doesn't happen here, so I've had my slapping. falling into the trap of very low-grade IT. If you get very low-grade IT, it won't do what you want it to do, and you're continuously replacing it, and it costs you money, and you don't have to do that. Poor tech support skills. That's important. If you've got some, and that could be one of the courses, if you've got highly skilled technicians who can keep the place running, that's what's important. And poor communications. Poor communications can mean communicating with other organisations, communicating outwards or inwards, but just not talking to each other and those sorts of things. So they're some of the constraints that I thought might be there. Establishing the college. Position in areas of need. If it's going to be a physical entity, find out where your biggest area of need is and put it there. Do you want students trekking 1,000 miles to somewhere out that looks really nice and space age, but they can't actually get to? And then if they can't get there, you've got to accommodate them. And if you've got to build accommodation, you've got all the problems. So that's what I mean by that. Define is 21st century school, and I went through those this morning about redefining the learning spaces. Make your classrooms look like the things you want to do. Then you have a strategy for ongoing revenue. Getting the money, believe me, is not that hard. Keeping the money going to keep the place going is extremely hard. And so you have to have strategies for revenue streams going forward. So you identify them, and some of them could be underserved markets. So, where isn't there anything that you can help with that you might be able to charge a small fee for? Franchising. Now, franchising, another of colleges, you build a brand, that brand is yours, that brand becomes synonymous with excellence and skills and great teaching and students going through having a great time but learning lots of things. And then you franchise it out. So if you have it in Joburg, you can sell it to Cape Town. No, I was joking. But you have 9 regions, so you might have 9 franchises that are on there, and you connect them digitally because they don't need to trek backwards and forwards. But more importantly, the one I designed, there were other countries who were thinking about it but didn't have the wherewithal, and so they franchised the brand. And you charge for that franchise, so it's a revenue stream. Conferencing. If you've got a place where you can hold conferences like this, or you can get companies to come in and do their conferences there, and sales conferences and things like that, you can charge. CPD. CPD is very important, and most companies do it. And so therefore you can have a CPD centre, and they come there and they pay for it. Company training. Companies, successful companies, do a lot of training to keep ahead of the game. You can charge for it. Faculty sponsorship. You can get sponsorship from people because you've built the brand. And once you've built the brand, people will be running over each other to get part of it. And for faculty sponsorship, you can charge for it. And foreign students, and that's what Adrian mentioned this morning, foreign students, they might not have something in their place, but they want to come. And if they want to come, then you charge, because it's free for your population, but you charge for others. It depends on where. That's just a few things you can do. Resourcing the college. Recruit your staff, get your admin systems right, recruit your students. You can do it through radio, you can do it through TV, you can do it through social media. There's all sorts of things you can do. But you build up a head of steam where people are desperate to get there and start. Accommodation, well, you might have accommodation, you might not. But healthcare and well-being of students is very important. Students have anxieties because they're young and they're going through those years when there are lots of anxieties. So you have to look after their well-being. And then might be an issue, might not. It certainly was in the area of Nigeria I was in, and that was staff and student security. So that's just something to think about. The learning infrastructure. Oh, I've done it again. A robust renewable energy supply. That's important, because if all your stuff stops on a semi-regular basis, you're not going to do much learning. And people get really fed up with getting halfway through a project and everything shuts down. Use of cloud computing, a learning platform. There are loads around. You can devise your own or whatever. But it just means that the students and the staff and the outer fringes of your community are all working. I think the term is on the same page, but it's on the same page of a learning platform. You have a student IT virtual shop, and that is a portal where students, who if they want to and if they can go in and they buy a college laptop or a college iPad or a college smartphone. You controlled it, you've put it on there, you can subsidise students without knowing they're being subsidised, which is very important. And you can give extra subsidies for the most disadvantaged, and you give the least subsidy to those who are advantaged. But you just do it in a different way, and all the students do is they get a code, and when they put the code in, it drops the price. So you can do all of that. And you can use pre-owned stuff. I mean, pre-owned iPads and laptops, they're perfectly serviceable, and they will last 2 or 3 years, and they're a third of the price. There's no problem with that. And how do you source the technology? Well, I suggest that if you do source it, you have to work out how you're going to pay for it. And the way to go for lots of people is leasing the equipment. So you lease the equipment, you pay a termly fee, you know how much your outgoings are, it's all covered by warranties, and after 3 years, they buy it back, but they buy it back at the beginning, if I make myself clear. They buy it back at the beginning and say, this is how much we think it's going to be worth after 3 years, so we'll knock it off your payments. And then after 3 years, somebody arrives, takes it away, hopefully it's the company that sold it to you and not a few fellas from round the corner, and they take it away and you get some new stuff. And that way you're renewing and refreshing without huge capital outlays all the time. So what faculties and courses? Well, these are some that I was involved in: film and television production, interactive media and animation, graphic design, sound technology and live events. I haven't been involved in live events, although this is pretty live, and I'm standing here, so I must be involved. But not in obviously not in your terms. I didn't manage to do the dancing. I couldn't get up in time. Going on with media and communications, creative advertising, marketing and public relations, journalism, computer gaming. The biggest explosion in wealth creation of any companies are gaming. And strangely enough, 16-year-olds are fantastic at writing programs for this gaming. I don't understand any of them, but they have, and a lot of universities have now got sponsorships from companies and have a whole suite dedicated to gaming and photography. And I've noticed that there are some photographers around here today, and that's great because you get employed and you're taking it and all that sort of stuff. I'm near the end, don't worry. But if we're going to have the state can't employ everybody, then you need to do some business studies so they understand a bit of accountancy, communications and web, marketing and PR, sales and negotiations, supply chain and human resources. I'm not talking about them being, Richard Branson, but I am talking about knowing how to produce a small business plan, how to attract funding and how to get their start-up businesses going. Because they'll be fairly young. It's quite daunting to walk into a bank and start talking about your little business. But if they've got the skills, they'll be able to do it. And the most important one, entrepreneurship, business planning, funding, creativity and innovation, risk tolerance. Risk tolerance is part of entrepreneurship, because there's a lot of risk attached to it, so you have to build in tolerances. Responsiveness, most important, you are teaching these young people to be leaders of the future. And so leadership, you can be taught how to be a leader. So you have leadership courses. Energy. Should I skip over this one? Many African countries, 325 days per year of bright sunlight, receiving 2,000 kilowatts per hour per square metre per year. I was telling someone I sat on a 10-hour plane journey, and I just happened to have someone sitting next to me who was an expert in this. I mean, my brain had dropped out by 2 hours, but I did retain some of it. This gives solar power the potential to bring energy to virtually any location without the need for expensive grid-level developments. That's important. I was talking to somebody at lunchtime, and the way they work it is on a honeycomb system. So if you've got government buildings, or you've got a number of buildings, you put the cells up there, you bring it in, and then you connect to the next piece of honeycomb, and so it works like that, and you can store the energy. But more importantly, you're not having massive grids, and you're not having massive arrays of solar farms miles up in the hills trying to get it all in. So it's quite important to do that. As of 2013, they've fallen well below that of nuclear power and is set to fall further. The average retail price of solar cells fell below 60 US cents per watt, which is pretty cheap. But you just need to determine it. And you can sell it. And I know you can because I've done it, and you can sell it to other organisations, and you become a solar hub. So not only are you teaching skills and bringing out skills, you become a solar hub and you sell it. It's another revenue stream. So teachers really must move beyond the role of facilitators and become collaborators in learning. And the biggest thing I had to learn when I was a teacher is, strangely enough, I didn't know everything, and I thought I did. And then I found out I didn't. It came as a terrible blow to me. And so you become a collaborator, especially with the internet now, and you work like that alongside students. And what your role will be is modelling positive habits of work and mind. Aim high for our students. Encourage research and development in our vocational college to create a platform. I mean, if you're doing solar energy, you can have research and development department into solar energy. That'll bring you a lot of money in. Set standards for quality across the college, regularly review the performance and compare those with your competitors, and then you know where you are, and you can protect your brand and you can increase your brand profile. Regular use of industry masterclasses, exposing students to regular successful business people and entrepreneurs. Encourage those business people and entrepreneurs to mentor students in vocational projects and industry competitions. Here's one. His name's Bill Frakes. He's a famous photographer, and he gave up a very lucrative profession to mentor students and really go around imparting his knowledge, which is what Adrian was talking about backstage this morning. But he also set up competitions, and I want to show you one competition. It's called the Insomnia Film Festival. And the reason it's called the Insomnia Film Festival, they are given 8 things to think about in producing a film, and they have to do it all, and get the team together, collaborate, get the script, get the production going, do everything in 24 hours. And then it goes into a competition, and they all get some computer kit and various things like that. So I'll show you this very quickly, perhaps.
Hey, Luke. Sweetie, what do you want for dinner? What about some sandwiches? your dinner's ready.
Hey, haven't I seen you before?
Yeah, well, I'm new, but I hang out with the army guys.
That's right. Yeah, you look familiar. You're over in the playpen, right?
Yeah, the playpen.
Yeah. Well, welcome to the crew. Have you enjoyed it?
Oh, love it.
Well, welcome.
Thanks very much.
But that was just an example. It was quite an interesting film. It was very, how they worked with the toys to get to reality, and they won the prize, which was some computer equipment. And actually, the Olsons, who were not disadvantaged, I might add, but they started up a little production company after that, and a couple of their college friends joined them, and they formed a production company, and they went on to be quite successful, making commercial films for companies. So it's all out there. So our digital learning campus, there it is. Technical and vocational college, and these are some of the things it could do or might not do. Live music, video tech, stage management, lighting, design, presentation, show control, event production, planning, industry, practice. But that could be replaced with anything to do with the hospitality industry, or replaced with anything to do with the tourism. It just depends what you want to do. So your 14 to 19 academy, I mentioned this morning, ought to have some adult education attached to it, because your adults do want to learn, and they do want to reskill. We had real problems in our coal mines because the coal mines closed, and our minister, who was a very, very wise man, he said, well, they'll all go into the service industry. We'll send McDonald's up there and they can all get those little stars. And so you got these really horny-handed miners all thinking about a career in McDonald's. No, it doesn't work like that. By reskilling, you mean giving them new opportunities. So I would always include some element of adult education. Excellence centres, because around and about there will be centres of excellence that are producing right stuff. And they may be companies, they may be schools, they may be anything. But those excellence centres ought to be drawn into the web of the vocational training college. And finally, your franchise centres. So when you're ruling the world and everybody has got your brand and they're paying loads of money for it and you've got thousands of students going through it, that might look like the diagram. Finally, a little bit about franchising. So, your central campus and then your franchise star, and each regional franchise campus would be electronically linked around the central campus, ensuring brand integrity and central resourcing. The aim of our college, we said this before, to create an environment highly conducive to entrepreneurship and innovation, to establish a platform for advancing innovation to market readiness, which will help South Africa tap into the global knowledge economy. And local young people must acquire those skills to be the leaders, the managers, and the innovators of the future. And there we are.